Good morning. Fast remembering why I don't stream on Saturdays. Because I'm usually in a shitty mood and there's so much traffic noise outside and all of the because we live near the hobby airport here. And so all the fuckwits are in their planes flying over my house all weekend. So stupid and annoying. Anyway, not in a mood. I'm in a mood. Anyway. So I just felt like I should stream because I haven't for a while, and I think it's kind of, you got to keep going and keep the stuff, ticking along. You'll start to hear the plane and the traffic and the fuckwits. Fucking hate Saturdays. Everything is just a low-grade noise on a Saturday. It drives me nuts. Anyway, welcome. Thought I'd better get it out of the way. I've been a bit busy because uni's back and I've got a massive hump of work. I've got having a major surgery in a few weeks, so I've kind of got to just get my ducks in a row there. And that, obviously surgery in the middle of uni means that I've got to get my shit together with uni. Otherwise, if I have complications or anything like that, then I also then fail out of that. So, but then I've also, obviously got to make a living as well. So it's just got a lot on. It is hard to stay motivated. And also, the way that this, the way this game is that you've kind of got to consume a lot of news. You've got to consume a lot of stuff. You've got to do a lot of research. And I'll talk about, like with today's stream, which is that if you're going to do this well and provide quality information, on any kind of particular topic, you've either got to spend sort of months doing it, but it does take a lot of preparation, right? Even if you do know a lot about the thing that you're talking about, you've got to prepare and it takes a lot of time. So as soon as I get busy, obviously, it's not just turning, anybody who streams knows that it's not just a matter of turning on a camera and talking shit. And I think anybody who thinks that is obviously not consuming quality information. There are a few people who are able to do it on the fly, but a lot of their stuff is their analysis is narrow, their analysis is shallow. They're sort of, they're not coming from a place of sort of, they're not really doing considered kind of stuff. Very rare number of people who can stream on multiple things every single day and be right or be correct, or at least make sure that they've given a considered position, right? And I do try to do that, even though, So, but obviously when I get busy, the first thing to fall by the wayside is my ability to do these things, because it's not my job. It's not, I appreciate my patrons. I very much do, but, that's not, $5 a month, $10 a month is not enough for me to spend days doing preparation and editing and all those sorts of things that come with this work. That's just a fact. And unless you're 8 years old and think that $5 a month is a lot of money, obviously, life has to happen. If you're an actually fully fledged grown up, then, you need a certain amount of money to justify a certain effort. Okay. And anybody who disagrees with that doesn't stream and doesn't do content, and they are in an incredibly privileged position to think that it is just a matter of, turning on a camera, riffing, talking shit. It's easy. To do what Tim Pool does is easy. To make stuff up or make up an argument and then argue with something that you made up, that's very easy work. To actually sort of digest some of the complexities around some issues, to make sure that you actually present good information. It's not going to be perfect, never is, because of the pace in which you have to produce information in order to keep up. Just for me to write an op-ed, it takes me days, and that's being an expert in a thing. Anybody who's sort of able to shit out content quickly, there is a proportional relationship, okay, negative correlation, if you will, between, the speed in which you can put content out and the quality of it. Hello, mainstream media. Hello, journalists. Okay, journalists are not information. Journalists are shitting out content. Okay, that's one thing. So we'll talk about that a bit with. I think one of the biggest things that problems. I think that I saw this years ago. This is part of the reason why I set the YouTube channel up, right? Which was because I started to see the wheels fall off of a lot of these things with social media particularly. And it was having sort of broader reaching. I saw a lot of sort of legal stuff, a lot of liability stuff, a lot of critical turning points with the internet that, I was kind of early to the punch, mostly because I'm super online, right? But also because it's what I do, right? And I saw a lot of these things, and obviously with the Twitter files and, those sorts of things coming home to roost a little bit, like we're becoming more aware of the degree in which censorship is occurring. I think that it warrants just sort of stepping back a little bit and just explaining why something, like you'll see these dickheads online who are experts in everything. They say, repeal Section 230. What does that mean? Okay. Or I oppose the Digital Services Act. Why? Okay. So a lot of this stuff this is the problem with, I suppose, first of all, like complex issues. Okay. Second of all, international, global complex issues. And third of all, ones that are not necessarily fixable with any one policy, being turned into a hyper-partisan, hyper-focused on America, US-centric, US-dominant debate. And these things affect all of us, okay? And I think a lot of people really don't understand necessarily why talking about American law and the American legal system when it comes to the internet is relevant to Australia. And it is, because basically these tech companies are headquartered in the United States, and anything that happens in the United States affects the tech companies. It affects the media we consume. Okay. Now, yes, to a degree, we can regulate that. To a degree, like obviously we can set rules around if you want to do business in Australia, you have to abide by certain policies. And that's what we've been sort of ahead in that regard. But, it's the same thing with the EU, right? Which is that, the EU implemented the GDPR. And, what these things do is put pressure on these private companies, okay, not government, to, to run their business in a certain way. So how policy works, it's not, and I think that this is one of the problems. And one of my frustrations is that this is going to be long. You can't do this in a TikTok. You can't explain this shit in a TikTok. And if you can, you're not explaining it correctly. I've spent how many hours? 600 hours just exploring this one. Obviously there's a lot of tentacles that sort of, we branch off that. And obviously my own meandering is not helpful. But at the same time, these things, there's so many different ways to slice an issue. I find that this whole ecosystem of content, just in general, podcasts, political commentary, anything really, is a lot of people offering answers in a neatly, obviously the commodification of things doesn't help, but but people need to take a bit more responsibility for not presenting their analysis as the only answer that exists. For every problem that you've got, there's several different ways to look at it. It really depends on what thin slice you're focused on. Okay, it depends on the context of the question. It depends on who which specific demographic you're talking about. It depends on which platform. It depends on which country in which platform. It depends on which user group within policy within which platform. These things actually do have a tremendous amount of complexity to them. It's almost like the law exists for a reason or something. It's almost like these things are complex and they need like time to resolve. And that I don't know whether these sort of opinions that are presented as authoritative. I'm thinking of people like Tim Pool, but it's not just him. It's just the model. It's just everything. It's the incentives where as a user, your demand your demand for short content, your demand for creators to do all of this shit for free, your demands on people's time, when people, people's time is a gift. And, this is somewhat related to, like, I think there's been at least 3 or 4 instances where I've referred to a topic, like, say, MCN or something else, grifter, okay? Or I've talked about a word or the definition of a word, or explored sort of what words mean, okay? And someone will ask me what the definition is, and I'll go, you have a device at your disposal. You have a miracle machine at your disposal. You could actually, it's quicker for you to change tabs and Google something than it is to ask someone else to spoon feed you information. Okay. And this is a responsibility. This is not about the influencer. I've talked a bit about influencer responsibility, but there is a user responsibility as well. There is a responsibility as a fucking basic baseline body, 37-degree body temperatured, fucking breathing, living human being. And that is that other people's time, other people's energy, that is something that they gift to you, okay? These social media platforms, they are a gift. They are a privilege, okay? And I think that that's one of those things where we need to reframe this, which is that this technology, whilst I think we're sort of, again, lumping lots of things in together at once. That's what we do, and especially in the content game. But there's rights, okay, and then there's privileges. And social media, to an extent, is a privilege, okay? And as long as it's not a public utility, as long as it's not, as long as it's not run by the government, as long as it's not essential for you to run your day-to-day life, it's not necessarily a right. Okay, you have a right to political expression. You have a right to free speech. Okay. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have the right to use a platform in, any way that you see fit. Okay. These things are still to be decided. And I think that that's one of the, again, like I said, you have a responsibility as a user. Okay. Contracts go 2 ways. Okay. You have obligations and you have responsibilities and you have rights. If you have rights, you have responsibilities. It's a 2-way street. Okay. And so just to get you thinking about this, which is, our generation in particular has been gifted with something quite extraordinary. Okay. I think about like doctors who dedicate, decades of their lives to become a surgeon just so they can save you. Okay. Think about engineers who sit and they build a product. Okay, they invest their time, and yes, there's a profit incentive, all of that stuff. Okay, but politics isn't everything. Fucking socialist analysis is not the center of the fucking universe all the time. Okay, I've said this before. I'm a political scientist, and I think most people are too fucking obsessed with politics, especially being stupid about it and not contextualizing these theoretical perspectives. They're not they're not a world view. Okay. There are exceptions to these things. There are new problems where old ideologies don't quite fit, and tech fits under that, okay? So yes, you can acknowledge the profit motive. You can also acknowledge that government controlling social media is not a good idea. You can acknowledge multiple things at once, and you can say, you know what, in this instance, this toolkit, this ideology, this set of tools from the 18th fucking century doesn't work for this problem, okay? For this problem, capitalism works. For this problem, this analysis works. We should analyze both through different lenses. That's how it works. It's not a fucking sporting team. Okay. And it's the same thing. I've talked about this before with the Twitter files particularly. And a lot of this sort of socialist, arbitrary, childish, this billionaire hate. Oh, billionaire. Well, what else have you got? Who else? What solution do you have? What solution are you presenting? Are you suggesting that governments and the state own social media? Okay. Are you suggesting that somehow, we figure out a way? Obviously, you've got federation, of social platforms. You've got all that stuff. That's great. How do people get compensated? What's your plan? What is your plan? There's a lot of people moaning. There's a lot of people asking me shit that they could Google. There's a lot of people who want 15-second clips, can't be asked learning anything, and then complain and attack anyone who tries to help them. And it's just like, this is one of my frustrations, okay, with this stuff. And then you just go to the people who are offering the 15-second answers. You fucking go to the stupid people. You go to the people who are packaging shit up and lying to you. And then everyone's fucking losing their minds and act surprised why. And everyone's going, oh, why? So this is all predictable. You got to meet people halfway. You got to meet, the social, these things are a two-way street. Okay, it's not just you passively consuming whatever the fuck you want to consume and like not having to give anything back. And that doesn't mean harassing people in their chats. That means actually contributing something productive and like I've talked before about builders versus wreckers or destroyers, right? Be a builder. Be the change that you want to see. I know that's a cliche, but I try to be the change, like in my chat, everything. I live my values every single fucking day. Some of those values are not consistent because I'm a human being and human beings are inconsistent because that's how humans are. And also, like I was saying before, it depends where you slice it. In this moment, I have this position. When you bolt on something else, that changes the context of what I'm talking about. So then I have a different perspective on it. So like with Twitter, yeah, Elon Musk being a billionaire. Yeah. What else you got? Okay, I'm dealing with the information in front of me, okay? I'm not sitting in a fucking, debate club sitting around doing fuck all. I'm doing what I can do. Okay. So anyway, that's the same thing with just when I'm talking about complex issues in general. My opening is that this stuff is complicated and people are watching people like fucking Tim Pool. They're watching people like that who are just pushing for, presenting themselves as an expert in tech, presenting themselves as, some sort of authoritative source when we know that he does, 5-6 stories a day. He doesn't read enough. Most of these people are on this, conveyor belt or treadmill or whatever the fuck, hamster wheel, where they're just constantly producing content. They're not actually exploring the complexity. It's not physically possible. Okay, I'm a practitioner in this space. I'm an expert in tech, and I still need days to prepare for every single stream. That's how complex this stuff is, okay? And this is just the reality. And unfortunately, when you're not paid to do it, you got to do it around other things. So anyway, and then when you do show up, you get dickheads arguing with you in the chat, and you go, well, what's the fucking point of any of this? And then I end up cranky. I don't want to be cranky. I want to be able to share information, quality information on complex issues with people, but something's got to give. You can't just keep expecting, I was so pissed off where I just got so tired of being asked what words mean when someone can just pick up the fucking thing that they're tweeting at me with and look it up. Read the dictionary. Fuck. Look it up yourself. That's all I'm asking. Read things. Don't outsource your thinking to other people, okay? Fuck. Some people just spend so many years trying, and I've spent the last 4 years just trying to fucking phrase things in the correct way and condense them in the correct way and receive shit, demand after demand after demand for no money. And then it's like, yeah, okay, fuck this shit. I'm only going to listen to people who pay me. I will do it in the format and length that I want to. I will not be fucking heckled in my chat by dickheads who are arguing with me. Set up your own channel, okay? And it's just like, what's the fucking point? And then you sort of, again, I went on, I was just going to call in because it was just like getting used to just being off the cuff. And I called into a show yesterday, a show that I watch. I'm a patron officer. And they sort of made me an impromptu guest on the J.K. Rowling thing. And I'm just frustrated. I'm frustrated that everyone is now in a tribe. You can't get cut through on complexity, but also just this for or against, 1 versus 0, thinking where I can just show up and go, okay, here's the thing about J.K. Rowling. Here's where she fucked up. Here's where she's right. Here's where she's, I wish that she'd done things differently. I've been on, you can watch all of my streams and go, I've been in support of J.K. Rowling on some things. I've not been supportive on others. I've explored sort of why that dynamic might exist in particular with the Harry Potter fandom, because it is a particularly parasocial fandom where, and obviously the timing of what she was doing in a pandemic when kids were looking for, some kind of leadership. I can understand how some people might be like grieving that or hurt from that. That's a normal human response. And I think that to dismiss that is to sort of gaslight, and it's just like, well, no, why can't we just sit and explore that? But then people go, oh, it takes too long. Explain it to me in 10 seconds, please. Or it's not relevant. And it's like, fuck me. News brain. This is what leads us where we are. And I'm just saying, like, if you're watching this, I want you to take personal responsibility for this. Okay? I want you to commit to looking things up rather than asking people. I want you to spend more time reading longer form content, watching longer streams without expecting everything to be in a fucking soundbite. Because that is the problem that we've got. That is the problem. It is at the core of every problem that we've got with the internet, and it is just a race to the fucking bottom. And I'm just this like, TikTok brain bullshit. I'm just fucking sick of it. Okay, and it shouldn't. I should not have to adapt. My thinking and my work. It's a race to the bottom. You can never be stupid or simplistic enough to keep most of the user base, especially on places like TikTok, happy. And I'm just going to do what I do. But do try to value the gift that people are giving you of their time, of their resources, of the the fucking decades of experience. The decades of experience that they distill for free. And I just think, try to have some humility about it. Look stuff up. I mean, think about something like Wikipedia, where, that's been largely, obviously up until recently, largely volunteer driven. People who have gifted their time and their energy because they are committed to the sharing of information, the free sharing of information. And this is what is under threat at the moment. And I'm getting to Section 230 and how this stuff actually matters. American law matters more than it should. But that's because most of these tech companies are American companies. They're based in the United States, and obviously the Wild West that is United States largely dictates a lot of the policies. Now that's changing. Okay, so this is where Europe and the GDPR and Digital Services Act, they do have more impact on these tech companies than they would. Than they would if they were just a purely United States business, mostly because the market, the size of the EU market, it is in Twitter and Facebook's best interest to comply with EU's regulations, much like Australia. Whereas Australia has actually been slightly more under threat because we're a small market. Okay, that was one of the things with the Facebook case that I talked about, like I can't remember, ages ago. But one of their main things was, well, we'll just pull ourselves out of the market because that's not in, it's not like it's China. We're not China. We're not the EU. We're a very small, relatively small market. And Facebook were testing to see whether they could sort of hold us over a barrel because we're only, 22, 23 million people. But in terms of EU is a very large market and a very large user base. And obviously, Twitter and Facebook and Google and those sorts of things, they would probably be more inclined. It's in their interest to comply with the law there. Now, from a corporate point of view, having like two systems for each is inefficient. It costs too much. It's inefficient. All those sorts of things. So there's going to be that sort of effect. There's a lifting effect that happens with the EU tech policy, which is that even if America doesn't do it, okay, even if America lets them do whatever the fuck they want and all this sort of stuff, they're kind of forced into, somewhat nudged over into the EU standard because this is where capitalism kind of works. It's where markets work a little bit when they're running well, which is that it will the interest of the company is to sort of streamline and make their processes and everything be in line with the most rigid scenarios, right? So their legal department would be, and we all know how the legal department runs Twitter. But, so they're corporate lawyers, even though they're based in the United States. See, Twitter, they don't really want to be sitting here fending off lawsuits all the time. And this is what I think is coming down the pipe, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing, which is, I saw this coming like some time ago. And that is that, we're seeing that, a whole bunch of people suing social platforms all over the place. And I think it is very important for you as an everyday user of the internet to really start seeing that this is a fucking privilege, not a right, but also start to appreciate what this is. Not see how these are it's not a given, okay, how it can be taken away, and how some of the legal movements that are happening are very disturbing, and how also you can be in general support of a law, but also have the political forces. So even though a law exists, this is something I think people don't understand, that it doesn't end with there being the law. Okay, so Australian law is very much built on that sort of premise, which is that you can have a law, but it's not a law unless it's enforceable. Okay, yes, you've got a statute, but it's only relevant if it's enforced, first of all, and it's also only really a law if it's like an opinion on how a law is interpreted. Unless there's been a judgment on what that means, it's just your opinion. It's an argument. It's a legal argument. So, this idea that, assuming that you've just got these rights, is not. These things are hard fought. There's a lot of things that people just take for granted, and they just let everyone else do the work. They let everyone else fight the fights. They let everyone else do all the fucking heavy lifting. And then they just turn around and start moaning about their rights as though it's a given. They're not. You've got to always keep fighting for rights. Rights is an ongoing process, and it is constantly under threat and is constantly under attack. And this internet stuff is no different, okay? This is going to be the biggest rights fight that we're going to see for the next decade. These things are important. Okay, and I'm going to try and explain. Let's go back to basics a little bit, okay, on what Section 230 is and does, why the case that's just been accepted by the Supreme Court in the United States is significant, okay, and what might be happening there. I'll try to make it as quick as possible, okay, because it is pretty fucking boring, but I'll try to make it interesting. But I also want to say that just because something's a law, okay, and it's never over. That is never over. That fight is never finished. Participate. Learn. Okay? And the more that I'm starting to see sort of the inevitable political outcomes, sort of we're heading for World War III. Let's just park that for a minute. But let's also, I'm just watching how, not to... Right. But this idea that democracy dies in darkness, okay, it dies in censorship. That's what democracy dies in darkness ultimately means, which is that democracy dies when people don't have access to information. They don't see what's going on. They aren't able to behave democratically. They're not able to freely associate. All of these things, okay, are under threat right now. Okay, across the world. This is a worldwide thing. This is, again, for the Americans that watch, it is really important to emphasize that just because you think you're the default and the center of the universe, you're dragging us all down with you. Okay, and everything that America does affects everyone else. And I know most Americans don't really give a shit about that sort of thing, but I do. And I do care what we're dragged into because you guys can't fucking get it together, right? But I think that, I think I've said this before, Caitlin Johnson said, why it's not, they are our fucking government. We don't get a say. It's basically an unelected government by proxy, okay? And we're seeing that with the war. So anyway, I'm not going to talk about the war. Let's just assume that's a given. And I think you'll understand why at the end of this stream, why I choose to just not dive into things. First of all, because I'm not an expert in those things. And like I said, I practice what I preach. I don't mouth off about stuff I don't know about, which is why I find it interesting that people think I'm just mouthing off about stuff I don't know anything about when I deliberately don't do that, okay? I know about this. So anyway, But there's a case in front of the United States at the moment that I think warrants pause. Okay, and it's really interesting to watch because you're also seeing so frustrating that the greatest purveyors of disinformation are jumping on this bandwagon but misrepresenting the problem, okay, which is, Fox News ecosystem, a well-established sort of disinformation ring, right, they're running with this idea that the Democrats are communists, which is ridiculous. But people, it works with people because, like I said before, the simple things are easy and people run with it. That's how humans work. We run with patterns. We run with bullshit. Bullshit travels faster than truth because the truth is more complex, okay? And unfortunately, because people can't be asked, Googling even one word rather than tweeting at the person, what does that mean? It's like, fuck me. Anyway, pisses me off. Really pisses me off. But what we're dealing with a problem where the laws don't fit. They haven't, governments are like a decade behind where they should be anyway. I've joked about this before, which is like they'll haul Mark Zuckerberg into Congress, and I reckon 50% of them were like, hey, young man, can you help me unjam my printer? Or can you help me with this thing? Like, oh, you look like you know about computers. That fucking bullshit. It's like, no, you're behind. Legislate. Learn. Don't just fucking sit and just learn. You've got to learn things. You can just fucking, that's a big part of being a reactionary and being conservative, is this refusal to fucking learn new things or adapt to new things. And we need to adapt urgently to this thing because the threat of fascism is fucking real. The threat of World War III and no one else fucking paying attention because that's been censored on the internet and no one can talk about it. That's a real fucking threat. So,
uh-oh, retard alert!
So anyway, right, so there's a case before the Supreme Court in the United States, all right, and it's the Gonzalez case, right? And so that's currently, it's really interesting because the Supreme Court have actually agreed to take the case on. So in the United States, it's sort of, the Supreme Court can agree or can agree that there's a legal argument here to be had. So it's something that they find interesting, they will hear. They'll accept, they'll hear the case, right? But they'll also reject others. So there's another one that the ACLU have submitted, which is Wikimedia versus NSA. Wikimedia versus NSA, that was rejected. And so we've got to understand that there's a political context to this, but I'll get to that. But the Supreme Court in the United States will pick and choose what cases it hears. So it has the right to sort of deny appeal, right? Which is, slightly different here, but it's, yeah. So it's called the Gonzalez case, right? Where the relatives, this is where it gets interesting. Actually, no, I won't go there. I'll start with Section 230 because I think you need to understand where it started. So Section 230, you've probably heard that before. That refers to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And that was written in, well, there's a whole sort of lead up there. I won't bore you. But basically, in 1996, that law was passed and legislated that, it's under the Communications Decency Act, which is odd. But that's just, America's going to Americate. The Communications Decency Act, Section 230, basically gives internet software, what's it called? Hang on, where are we? Online services. So remember, 1996, online services, that's the definition. And that they're not liable for material that is written by a third party on a website, okay, or an online service. Now, that would cover something like comments. So if I, on my blog, if you were to turn around and defame someone in my comments, in America, because in Australia I am liable, but in America, that gives the platforms a, they can't I can't be sued for, various things and defamation, that sort of stuff. So like they're not liable. Just leave it at that. Okay, so basically it gives them, that's the backbone of the internet. Okay, let's not overstate it, America, but it is a big part of how the internet functions, how, websites can actually stay up. And, internet forums, for example, if you run an internet forum and go to bed and something happens, then, obviously you don't want to be sued and liable for what people put on your forum. Okay. And that's another thing with Kiwi Farms, which was that those that sort of Section 230 protection and those sorts of things have really failed with Kiwi Farms as well, right? And there's so many different ways to abuse these processes. But anyway, but the fundamental thing about Section 230 is online services are not liable for third-party content, i.e. you, the user, being a fuckwit, okay? No matter how much you wreck the platform and ruin everyone's day with your bullshit and lies and insults and harassment, ultimately you can't sue Twitter, you can't sue Facebook. Facebook's not liable for that sort of stuff, okay, in America. Now, in Australia, we've got a couple of different decisions, but basically at the moment they have ruled that if you run a Facebook page, for example, as a publisher, so for example you're a media outlet and you run a Facebook page, if you you have a responsibility to moderate your comments on that platform. Okay, so if you're running that community on a Facebook, that you are actually liable for that. Okay, so it is different across the world and different. Obviously the EU has more sway, in terms of the law, because obviously the EU is a big market. Capitalism, yay! And so they're not going to threaten like they do Australia to withdraw their services from the market, right? But in the EU, the difference. Anyway, I'll talk about Section 230. Remember that was in 1996. So remember that law, that statute, whilst important. Remember, it was 1996 when this happened. Okay, there has been subsequent rulings, obviously, and robust debate and all that sort of stuff. But that was pre-algorithm. Okay, it was pre-social media. There was no social media in 1996. The only real social media was sort of internet forums, Usenet. A lot more sort of decentralized. There was no algorithm determining what people see. Okay. So, obviously it's not fit for purpose. Like we're seeing a lot of this stuff where Section 230, they are showing, my argument is that it's probably more of a tort, okay? That's a civil thing for negligence and that sort of stuff, okay? Where you go and you sue Twitter and you get a remedy and you show harm and then you get a remedy, right? So I think that there is a negligence argument there. And a lot of that is predicated on anyway, it's a whole other thing. But so defamation is anyway, it's mostly civil. But so people are sort of confusing some of these different laws. Hang on, I lost my train of thought. So I think it's key to say that Section 230 was pre-recommendation engine. So before, in 1996, if you were on the internet then, not many were, but, I was, a lot of it was just directories. It was just, this is here, this is on, we're not responsible for comments. Even internet comments, okay? A lot of this stuff, Section 230 was mostly designed to protect not even forums as such, but it was more to protect the ISPs, right? So your internet service provider, so much like so basically because they were, hosting, so people like, web hosts and ISPs and that sort of thing. So they weren't responsible because they weren't able to tell what files you uploaded to your website. They could not be held liable for what they were hosting because they had unless they were manually reviewing it or whatever, then, obviously, and they weren't not exerting editorial control because these things overlap with things like common carrier, all those things. Okay. So this was pre-algorithm, pre-recommendation. Now, this new case that's heading before the Supreme Court, it's interesting because you need a bit of context as to, like I said, how the Supreme Court picks and chooses cases. Now we're seeing this push, obviously, with conservative media to sort of sue big tech. There's a couple of lawsuits off the back of the Twitter files that are hitting, right? They're sort of in the lower courts. Like there's always a billion fucking lawsuits in the lower courts in the United States, especially the circuit courts, right? It's frantic. And the way that the Republicans fucking abuse that system is a whole other thing. But that's their right to do so, right? Well funded, that lot. But so there's this case. It's called the Gonzalez case, and it's a case that's initiated by the relatives of people killed in a terrorist attack. Okay, and their argument is that the terrorists were actually radicalized on YouTube. So they were incited to commit the action. They were encouraged to commit the action. They were radicalized via YouTube. Okay, that thing that we, I think some of us have experienced, but also, that's yeah, a known thing. So, but the anti-terrorism laws, right? They say that if you provide material support to terrorism, like if you aid and abet terrorism or provide material support to terrorism, then you are liable for that act. Okay, so that's actionable, right? So this is where laws interact with other laws. I've talked about this before. It's never one law. It's like the way that these things interact. The role of the courts is to synthesize all of that and come up with a fucking way to go forward. Now, there's no point arguing your legal argument on Twitter about a single law and the meaning of a law. It's pointless. You're not a judge. Shut up about it. So, who cares? Anyway, do something productive. So did YouTube provide, actually, my textbook fucking laughed last night. It just made me think of Twitter guys, these Twitter dudes. And it was like, it just had this, it's so much shade. There's always just shade in these things. I forgot how funny studying law was. Psychology's funny too, but law's even funnier. And it said many attempts have been made to litigate the Magna Carta, mostly by people who represent themselves. It just made me laugh. You can just imagine it. Anyway, so that's an interesting angle, which is their argument is that YouTube provided material support for these acts because they were radicalized on YouTube. Okay, they should be liable for the victims, right? The victims of that terrorist act, because the perpetrators obviously were sort of had it recommended to them that they do that, right? And again, this is a whole. There's so many theoretical things here with like individual responsibility and all that sort of stuff. It's too much to unpack, but let's keep it. I like to keep it under it's already been 45 minutes. I was hoping to keep it like an hour and a half max. But basically the question is, did YouTube provide material support for that terrorist act, right? Now, the lower court rejected it on the basis, right, on its surface. Prima facie case, they rejected it on the grounds of Section 230 and said, no, YouTube's not responsible. They said that online services are not reliable for material provided by users. Blanket. Okay. Now, it was rejected by the lower court on its surface. Now, the interesting thing here is that the Supreme Court have offered to hear it. So you've got to understand that the Supreme Court only offer to hear things when they think that there's going to be a decision that's going to be materially different from this case the judgment. And so there's a lot of speculation here that what they're going to do is differentiate between, and this makes sense because this is why I said that the Section 230 being in 1996 matters in terms of it, being pre-algorithm, which is that there is an argument here that YouTube did actively promote that via the recommendation engine. And so what they might do is they might actually start to split the difference between hosting it, i.e. passively hosting it, like, it's being uploaded versus it being recommended. And so recommendation and an algorithm where they actually program it to share certain content, that, so that you see content that is relevant to you and recommends more content to you, that there is actually an argument there that they did actually deliberately through, well, it might not be deliberately, it might be negligent. You can even get them on criminal negligence with this. I think the negligence angle is the winning angle. I've maintained this for years, which is that it is documented that they have made decisions and they've made deliberate, calculated decisions for profit over the years, much like this, the Palestine railroad thing, where they've made conscious decisions that were in favor of profit at the expense of users. It's the same thing with this, right? Where they have documented, they've made certain decisions that have been, it's not an accident. These are not. They've been playing this accident line, but it's not. And this is where it's really interesting, but also worrying. Okay, because there's just a lot here. So, but yeah, so there's a lot of speculation that what's going to happen is that they're going to differentiate, where if you post it, then they're not liable, okay? But if they're recommending it, then they are, okay? They lose their protections. Now, this is really like getting back to EU, right? EU law, which was what's it called? Fucking too many things. Electronic Commerce Directive. I always forget that one. The e-commerce directive. That's right. And that was in 2000. And it was basically a similar law. But the difference that they had, and it's probably more workable, which is that it's called a screen of, knowledge and notice, right? So basically, as long as they don't know that it's there, and as long as it hasn't been reported, okay, as long as no one's reported it or anything like that, then they have, and it's there without their knowledge, then they're not liable. But as soon as it is reported, as soon as they become aware of it, they lose all of their protections, right, under the law. That's the difference between sort of the EU law, very simply, and the Section 230. Okay, I know this is boring. I'm trying to, but so basically the difference in law is whether they know about it or not. Okay, now in practice, like I said before, with the way, if you have a law that is more restrictive in Europe, the United States can do whatever the fuck the United States wants, because business interests, it will be in their interests to just have a uniform procedure. So what we've seen with the Twitter files is pretty much that, which is that they just they have a reporting system. But this is it's actually very interesting to me how Twitter support being unmanned is an interesting business decision when you understand that them not knowing about it, okay, lets them off the hook. Do you see how these things all work? Which is that they have plausible deniability built in. If they don't respond to my shit, they can say, oh, we haven't seen it. We didn't know about it. There was no intent. We didn't know. We didn't know. So therefore, my ability to sue Twitter is gone, okay, because they don't know it's a problem. Now they do. Okay, and it's just like, you understand that, like, it's coming out that they have knowledge of these issues, and it's exposing them to vast amounts of liability under EU. So it's anyway. This is not a legal opinion at all. I'm just trying to summarize some of where this is heading, because I think you need to be concerned but I'm not coming to you with answers or conclusions. I'm saying you need to be comfortable with the idea that maybe this isn't solvable, and that maybe you're looking in the wrong places, which is that, this is why paying attention to bias, the abuse of political power, all of those things is the most important thing. And this is what I've been talking about for years and years and years to deaf ears. So anyway, so the Digital Services Act, that's like currently sort of, the new big thing in Europe. It's I think on balance it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. However, it's always going to be I support. See, the problem is I support the principles that are enshrined in it. I do not support its execution, and I do not support how I know it's going to go, which is that it'll basically be used as a weapon. Okay. But, this is why I just want you to be aware and be okay with the fact that there's maybe no answer here. Maybe you've got an answer. Maybe you've got an idea that others haven't thought of. And that's the beauty of having a conversation, but just leaving it. We don't have to have answers. This is not a course, okay? I'm not sitting here with a set of prepackaged answers. I'm still unsure as to where this is going to go. And that's why I think just going through the legal route and slicing it off into little pieces and, solving, again, like these, it depends on which slice. Like I said that actually, I think I was on Judas by mistake yesterday, and they were talking about the J.K. Rowling thing. And it's really easy to sort of look inconsistent when, like I said, when it's like, it depends what part of this thing you're talking about. It's so complex that you can, like I said, 1 + 1, I understand that it equals 2. 1 + 1, but then you've got an addendum A, and then you go, okay, well, that's different. That equals 4 now. It's a different fucking thing because the context shifts and the context changes and all those sorts of things. That's perfectly fine. That's how the law works. It's why judgments exist, which is to rule, in this instance, this applies, that doesn't apply, this is what happens. This is what, things have to move that way, okay? Anyone who's peddling straightforward, easy answers like repealing 230, which is horrific for the internet, I don't think it's the end of the internet. I think what it's going to do is do something similar to what the Digital Services Act is doing, which is to clarify some of these things. So what the Digital Services Act does, okay, is that it clarified some of the notice, the knowledge and notice stuff that I talked about. So if they don't know about it, they're not liable. If they do, as soon as they know about it and they don't act, they are liable. Okay. And that's where the Digital Services Act has also somewhat replaced that and clarified that and put very clear instructions on, right? So it says, like, it's got clear descriptions. Hang on, I've got notes here because it's, clear descriptions of the kind of notice, right? So what counts as knowledge? So this is where the Twitter files has been very interesting because it does sort of expose how they've deliberately kept themselves in the dark and known about things, but not enough to be liable. Like, I find it very, very interesting when you look at like they've been very clear about that sort of plausible deniability but as soon as this is where the Twitter files is quite significant because there are things that they claimed no knowledge of that they know, and that exposes them to liability. Does that make sense? But they also clarify that it has to be a good faith report. So it has to be something where they truly, it is highly likely to be illegal. Okay, they're not. Tech companies are not. I think this is one of the problems with copyright as well. I mean, copyright's a whole other part of this, right? But we'll just but copyright strikes or getting involved in legal stuff, it is not the tech company's job to decide what is legal or illegal. YouTube's position with copyright is to say, okay, well, we're forced to comply with these laws, but we're not going to decide. We can't decide what's in breach or not. That's for the courts to decide. That is the correct position to take. It's not YouTube's fault, but they're going to err on the side of caution because of these things, because of the the potential for the fact that if they know about it and it's been reported, that they are now liable, especially in the in the EU, right? See how these things interact with each other. It's not necessarily that they're being unfair. They're just a fucking business trying to do the best they can do in difficult circumstances for the most part. Okay, even the Twitter files, I think it's very, very difficult to pin much on Twitter aside. I mean, again, they can ask. They tried their luck. I haven't seen anywhere where Twitter has particularly they've maybe done a little quid pro quo around the place, or I find it very interesting and intriguing that a senior comms person at Twitter is now the managing editor of Pink News. I find that interesting, and that nobody's interested in that. I find interesting. A lot of use of the word interesting there. You know what I mean? It's intriguing to me that how cherry-picked people's interest is in these things, because I find that would warrant some kind of conversation about how feminists have been treated on Twitter and who's got influence there, because Pink News have been harassing and instigating a lot of this stuff for many, many years. So anyway, it's a side point. But yeah, so basically in the EU, if no one has told them that this thing's happening and they have no knowledge of it, then they're free of liability, okay? But they lose automatic immunity from Section 230, Section 230, from the e-commerce directive if they, know about it, right? And that's what I find really interesting about the idea of like the unmanned support, the 3 men in a trench coat at Twitter. I think that goes into the special filing cabinet where they don't see it. I think there's a reason why level 1 support is automated like that, because they've got plausible deniability. And it really only really gets escalated if it's about to get legal. Okay, I should have threatened to sue. Anyway, so basically, yeah. So the Digital Services Act just clarifies that, makes sure that it says, this is what we define by knowing. This is what kind of notice needs to be. It needs to be good faith. It needs to be sort of, if it's a grey area, then that's up to the courts and stuff. Like, it's not the platform's role, but you could potentially be liable, and they've got to make the calculation about whether they are going to risk court over this content or not. Now, that's going to have an effect on how risk averse they are. Okay, not only because of ad standards, which is law. Okay, that's under other decency and all those sorts of things. That's other fucking stuff, but that's also they're going to err on the side of safe with this stuff. So if it sniffs of liability, they're more likely to take it down. That's what we're seeing right now, is that if it's most likely to get litigious, if it's most likely to expose them, okay, they're gonna take it down, because that's just what this does. Okay, that has the net effect, especially when it comes to disinformation. I'll get to that. Anyway, but so, I mean, ideally through the Supreme Court, right, this is what's actually needed. In America, the judgment that is needed is to clarify Section 230, which is to differentiate between like this thing, which is recommendation versus posting, okay, platform, publisher, that distinction, right? Again, it's not that simple, okay? Fucking idiots like Tim Pool saying it makes them it's not that simple, okay? Because to be a publisher has its own specific set of examples, and when you are a publisher, other things kick in too, like ad standards, like editorial standards, like various other things, okay? Protection for journalists, protection for content creators. So if YouTube is a publisher, then there's all these other things that kick in. It's not like laws don't happen in isolation from each other. It's all interpreted in a massive, vast body of think Chat GPT, except anyway, it's just so silly that people think that just law is binary like this. It's just so stupid. Don't listen to anyone who's saying that these things are simple. But anyway, so what the US should be doing is doing much like the EU did, which is putting that notice in, right? So if they know about it, or there's a notice, or they're somehow informed of something that's illegal. Now, obviously, defining what is illegal is a whole other thing, but that's something that can be defined by a court. It's not tech companies' job. But they can put a notice liability system in place, right? But unfortunately, the Gonzalez case isn't actually answering that question. So what the Gonzalez case is asking whether the recommendation engine is, aiding terrorism, right? And is actually a recommendation of the content, and whether that is actually aiding, right? So it's not quite the question, because the Supreme Courts can only, the courts can only answer the case in front of them. They can't go, oh yeah, also this thing. They can only answer it like in line with those arguments. So, but this is where, obviously US Congress being effectively deadlocked at the moment is making it difficult. But I think that this is where, but also with the Twitter files, you find that there's not a lot of political will. The US government have been pretty sinister in the way that they've conducted themselves with this stuff, which is, it's very clear that the threat of regulation and the threat of legislation that makes them, that does this to Section 230 has been more beneficial to them than actually doing the regulation. And also, when you're regulated, you've got to have more public scrutiny versus this sort of background, unaccountable sort of shadow 3-letter agency shit that they've been doing, like with that's been exposed in the Twitter files. But obviously, we also use the threat of regulation, and it works. And this is where there's no sort of black and white answers here. So you can use the threat of regulation in a good way, and you can use it in a sinister way. These things are somewhat, again, it's just different. But the thing that concerns me the most is that obviously with the Digital Services Act, we're talking about like fairly sensible law for the most part. But the problem with fairly sensible law is that it doesn't exist in isolation from the political like environment that we're in. And the Twitter files has actually revealed something quite, obviously off the back of, Twitter files particularly. It's given us, I think it gives us pause about how, anyone who's come out of the last few years not seeing how something like disinformation has been wielded as a weapon to silence any kind of dissent. You live in a fucking bubble. Jesus Christ, have you had an original thought ever? Like, seriously, if you haven't seen how that is misused and abused politically, then you're probably living quite a boring life. But also this sort of failure, like, I just want to, because the thing that, as much as I want to support the Digital Services Act, right, I'm not sure I do, mostly because I don't think that it's going to be executed in the right way. Okay, because people are ignoring, obviously, the power, the forces at play with this stuff. Let me just bring this up. Oop, hang on. Okay, because what we've got here, hang on, not that one, this one, because this is the way that the people, this whole disinformation shit. Okay, a big part of the Digital Services Act, okay, is to combat disinformation. Okay, so how Congress can prevent Elon Musk from turning Twitter back into an unfettered disinformation machine. A new European Union law is a roadmap for how to put the onus on social media companies to monitor and remove harmful content and hit them with big fines if they don't. Okay. Our favourite psychopath. For too long, tech platforms have amplified disinformation and extremism with no accountability. The EU is poised to do something about it. I urge our transatlantic allies to push the Digital Services Act across the finish line and bolster global democracy before it's too late. EU imposes sanctions on state-owned outlets, RT, Russia Today, and Sputnik's broadcasting in the EU. This diagram, okay, this shows who are the biggest actors in terms of sharing disinformation. Okay, interesting, isn't it? Trump, Twitter, Fox News, yes, but also look, CNN, Washington Post, New York Times, NBC, Politico, USA Today. Okay, these are studies that show who are the biggest sharers of disinformation. Financial Review in Australia. Okay, Rupert Murdoch. Fox News, biggest share of bullshit. Private messages of Mr. Murdoch. We've seen that this week over the election fraud thing with Fox News, where they were sharing text messages with the defamation suit, okay, with the voting machines, Dominion voting machines. They're suing Fox News for defamation over the election fraud, okay, or the election being stolen. And a lot of the text messages that are coming out of Fox News and emails from Rupert Murdoch is that they knew that it was false and they said it anyway, okay. Private messages of Mr. Murdoch, executives and TV personalities will be seized on by Fox's staunchest critics. In Australia, okay, the material will also likely be used by Crikey, an Australian news outlet here, to defend itself in defamation proceedings brought by Fox CEO Lachlan Murdoch. Okay. So all of this stuff is happening behind the scenes where you're just seeing the same old bullshit and ordinary users are going to be affected by it. Okay. So the younger Murdoch has alleged the small Australian publisher defamed him over the publication of an opinion article that linked him and Fox to the US Capitol riot by the former president's supporters in 2021. Mr. Murdoch is expected to take the stand in a defamation case before the federal court with the trial delayed. Okay, so Crikey said that there was probably a link between Fox News and them storming the Capitol, and those texts are now showing that maybe they had something to do with it, and they knew what they were doing, and because it got good ratings, and that they would. Fox is actually really interesting, like the fact that they have been captured by their audience. They were worried that they were going to go further to the right, so they're afraid of their audience as well, which is hilarious. Also terrifying. Matt Taibbi, Lenzi, wrote to Twitter bluntly asking to remove 14 accounts distinguished, among other things, by skepticism of Russiagate. So anyone who doubted Russiagate was deemed a Russian asset, a Russian bot, and deplatformed from Twitter. Also, you had Congress members with the most recent one where he was, they're just sending spreadsheet after spreadsheet after spreadsheet of people who they didn't like. Some where they just said that they were weird. Weird. That's a weird account. Remove it. The Global Disinformation Index, which is a shadow fucking not-for-profit whose mission it is to basically blacklist a number of whoever they don't like. Okay, funded by Democrats, funded by the US State Department, the Global Disinformation Index. Look it up. Intercept. COVID-19 drug makers pressured Twitter to censor activists pushing for generic vaccine. The social media pressure campaign was just a part of the pharmaceutical industry's successful lobbying blitz to retain patents and make record profits. Hillary Clinton approved Trump Russia leak to media, her campaign manager says. Russiagate, bullshit. Hillary Clinton, bullshit. Cheering on the DSA, okay? That means I don't fucking trust it. I don't care how good it is. And this is the thing, if they're cheering it on, I don't support it. That makes sense. I mean it. So that's how I go. I don't trust, because what will happen is they will abuse it. And that's like, okay, well, I want to believe in that stuff. I want to think that that's the right thing. But it's just not. My enemy likes it. I don't like it. No, I'm kidding. I obviously take it on its merits. But also I want to point out that just merely passing this law is not enough. You need to make sure that you've got safeguards in place to make sure that people like that aren't abusing this system, okay, under the guise of disinformation and misinformation. Now, Fox News are the biggest purveyors of disinformation. This is settled. New study, once again, mainstream media is a bigger problem in spreading disinformation than social media. I love from the deal with Fox News first department. That made me laugh. We've discussed in the past. So this is the book that I've talked about, Network Propaganda. I really recommend you check it out. Okay, it's you can get it on Audible. It's an audio book, but I highly recommend it. It's also freely available online. But given people won't fucking Google a word, I doubt they're going to read a book. But anyway, do your best. Commit to learning something. Okay. A thing. Learn something. So we've discussed in the past Yosho Benkler's excellent book, Network Propaganda, showing with a ton of data how the inclination many have to immediately blame social media for the spread of disinformation is, in its own way, misinformation itself. What are the odds? What the research found was that crazy conspiracies didn't really spread as fast until they showed up on Fox News, which is true. I've talked about that thing where they'll launder it through the low-level cable news thing, various influencers. They'll create the storm in a teacup, and then it will go boom. Okay, and that's why, to an extent, the New York Post, the Hunter Biden laptop. If you're being charitable to Twitter, you can kind of understand how those, because some of this research was actually, a lot of it was based in something. Okay, which is that I could see how you would assess it as, okay, this is going to explode. This looks like the same shit that Fox News always pull or Murdoch Press always pull. Murdoch's fucking war on the internet is a known thing. It is well studied. There's loads of fucking data on it. And disinformation, fake news tends to not spread until a mainstream outlet runs with it. Okay. And that's the thing, like by reacting to Trump, they amplify Trump. You saw that was that diagram that I showed before. Let's go back to it. Where are we? Look. So look at this. So Trump starts it on Twitter. You can see how this plays, right? So Fox News spread their bullshit. Now, obviously, you've got some degree of sort of decentralized things here, right? It's all that and chatter and noise. Okay, so let's just dismiss that for a minute because it's overcomplicating things. But look, this whole ecosystem around here that who's designed to react to this fuckwit, okay, and these guys react to those fuckwits, and it's a whole ecosystem of mainstream media in the United States that basically, spread bullshit all the time. And it's not just Trump sending it, but it's them then reporting on Trump's tweets. It's them then reporting on Fox News. It's this whole fucking, but also don't forget, you've got NPR up here, AP, Reuters. Like all of the numbers and the research shows that it is actually mainstream media that are sharing most of this stuff. And bullshit doesn't spread really outside of small clusters of fucking, media outlets until it's amplified in the media. And that's a, first of all, tried and true digital strategy, which is to get it in the media. Second of all, it's this war on disinformation when they're talking about doing that on CNN. CNN are the people that are spreading most of the bullshit. Do you see? You see why these guys, it's just one big fucking Darvo, right? So anyway, where are we? Let's get rid of that. But this is, again, this is, like I said, I'm not going to... But what the research found that crazy conspiracy theories didn't really spread as fast until they showed up on Fox News. This was basically the catalyst for them to then spread wildly on social media. Okay, so it goes viral. Fox News are the catalyst for viral content, as is the mainstream media. And that's why you've got all these bots. It's why you've got all these like PR campaigns and all those things that target journalists, because we know this. You can't go viral without getting picked up in the media, really, okay? The media do pour jet fuel on anything. Like sometimes, every so often, it's an outlier. And it was mostly in the early days where things would go viral, but they wouldn't go truly, fully viral until it was picked up by mainstream media, okay? Even today. It's mostly contained, okay, to small groups. So, Ben Clare and his team are back with a new study specifically regarding how disinformation about mail-in ballots has spread. And again, the details show that mass media was the key in making it spread, with social media playing a secondary role. Despite the consensus among independent, academic and journalistic investigations that voter fraud is rare and extremely unlikely to determine a national election, tens of millions of Americans believe the opposite. This is a study of the disinformation campaign that led to widespread acceptance of this apparently false belief and to its partisan distribution pattern. Contrary to the focus of most contemporary work on disinformation, our findings suggest that this highly effective disinformation campaign, with potentially profound effects for both participation in and the legitimacy of the 2020 election, was an elite-driven, mass media-led process. Social media played only a secondary and supportive role. Okay. And this, this is, yeah. And this is coming, this is what's come out with the Dominion lawsuit. And people are not quite joining the dots with this stuff, which is that Fox do this on purpose. They know it's bullshit. And, like Lachlan Murdoch will now, was it Lachlan Murdoch? No, it's not Lachlan Murdoch, is it? It was James. One of them fucking idiots. Like this claim that linking them Fox News and Murdoch papers to the insurrection, it's not defamation. It's actually fucking based in something. It's actually like they ran with this stuff on purpose, knowing it was false. But because they knew that the audience wanted it, they were hungry for that kind of content. They didn't believe it, and that's coming now home to rule. Isn't the legal system marvelous? This is why I was like, okay, let's get out of psychology. Let's go into the legal system. Like, let's just fucking get the law shit over and done with, because it is really the best way to solve problems. You just need to be patient, and these things have a tendency to come out in the wash. So assuming we don't all fucking have our skin melting off from nuclear weapons and shit because these fuckwits don't know when to quit. So, using the same methods in network propaganda, they found that this time it went beyond Fox News. But that the president was basically using his position as president to harness the big mainstream media operations, which still have simply failed to contend with how to cover a president who deliberately lies, who deliberately tries to bully the media into spreading utter nonsense. The report shows that he's been very, very successful in turning the media, who he frequently accuses of publishing fake news, into actual purveyors of fake news, namely the fake news Donald Trump himself wants them to spread. It's interesting. Our findings suggest here that Donald Trump has perfected the art of harnessing mass media to disseminate and at times reinforce his disinformation campaign by using three core standard practices of professional journalism. These three are elite institutional focus, if the president says it, it's news, headline seeking, if it bleeds, it leads, and balanced neutrality or the avoidance of the appearance of taking a side. He uses the first two in combination to summon coverage at will and has used them continuously to set the agenda surrounding mail-in voting through a combination of tweets, press conferences, and television interviews on Fox News. He relies on the latter professional practice to keep audiences that are not politically pre-committed and have relatively low political knowledge confused. Have relatively little, that's a really weird sentence, have relatively low political knowledge confused because it limits the degree to which professional journalists in mass media organizations are willing or able to directly call the voter fraud frame disinformation. And this is really interesting because they're abusing disinformation. He's using disinformation. It's a good law. They're bad guys. He's a fuckwit. He uses the bad guys. I hate them all. And I just want the internet to be fucking free. You see where I'm going? Which is why it has to sit with us to do the right thing and decide to fucking have nice things and not ruin it. Because with time, anyway. So, of course, Fox News and the wider Republican Party and media ecosystem also remains a key issue. The president is, however, not acting alone. Throughout the first 6 months of the disinformation campaign, the Republican National Committee and staff from the Trump campaign appear repeatedly and consistently on message at the same moments, suggesting an institutionalized rather than individual disinformation campaign. The efforts of the president and the Republican Party are supported by the right-wing media ecosystem, primarily Fox News and talk radio functioning in effect as a party press, which is true. That is correct. These reinforce the message, provide the president a platform, and marginalize or attack those Republican leaders or any conservative media personalities who insist there is no evidence of widespread voter fraud associated with mail-in voting. Now, the problem is that CNN and MSNBC and all those, they're effectively partisan media as well. It's just that this is one of the problems that I've got, which is that they accuse Fox News of being partisan for the Republicans and the default is partisan for the Democrats, and you're not allowed to say that they're partisan media as well. And that's sort of the frustrating part, which is that confuses people and they think that you're not acknowledging that issue, which I do. Tremendously fucking partisan on both sides. And this is the problem, that we're all caught in the crossfire. Users are caught in the crossfire, and they're all fucking just sending us down the fucking shitter and taking us with them. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about your rights. They care about nudging the needle. So Benkler wrote a detailed post for the Columbia Journalism Review that gives a more reader-friendly version of the paper's fine. In it, he notes that when it comes to mail-in ballot disinformation, it's not happening because of foreign interference or social media algorithms. The disinformation is coming from inside the White House. What this means is that the usual suspects in public debates about disinformation are not the central actors in voting disinformation. So these question marks here, just so you know, it's not because this is a bad source. I imagine they've just updated their style sheets and stuff, and it was quotation marks and somehow passed it in an import. So it's Tech Dirt, a newsletter that I subscribe to and recommend for good coverage of tech stuff. But I just wanted to, in case you're sitting there thinking that I'm ignoring that, it's not. It's probably just a formatting thing. So I do try to vet the sources that I use, believe it or not. But I did actually see some stuff from the Washington Examiner on the they've done a bunch of coverage on the Global Disinformation Index and who funds them and stuff. But it's clearly Republican, hyper-partisan fucking press. So I don't share it, but I'll, have a look it up and with a critical eye, of course, if you want to read it. But I'm not going to personally share that shit. Unlike Tim Paul, who fucking does nothing but use the Daily Mail and like all those terrible garbage sources, right? I do try to vet my sources. And this is a trusted source for me. Okay, I trust tech dirt. Whatever. Okay. Their analysis is good for tech news. Where are we? Where are we? So we found no examples where clickbait. We found no examples where clickbait factories, fake pages, Russian or otherwise, or Facebook's algorithms could explain any peak in engagement that was not better explained as having been set in motion and heavily promoted by political figures and elite right-wing media personalities, and disseminated to millions by major media outlets. On Twitter, if bots or trolls played any role, it was dwarfed by tweets from the president, his staff, and other institutional and media allies. While information does eventually spread on social media, that happens after the mainstream media discusses it. As Benkler notes, all the worries and attacks about social media appear to be somewhat misguided. There is a profound disconnect between the broad public concern with social media disinformation, the persistent scientific evidence, and this links to several different papers, that exposure to online fake news is concentrated in a tiny minority of users, and survey evidence that repeatedly linked shows that less than 20% of US respondents say they rely on social media as a major source of political news. Network and local TV, by contrast, are the primary source of political news for about 30% of the population, and news websites or apps accounted for another 25%, according to the most recent Pew survey. When arranged according to the degree in which they report believing mail-in voter fraud is a major problem, adults who get their news from ABC, CBS, and NBC occupy an intermediate position between Fox News viewers on one end and readers of the New York Times, viewers of NBC, or NPR listeners on the other. Local TV news viewers, in turn, form the least political knowledgeable group of Americans, edging out the much younger respondents who mostly rely on social media. Now, local TV news viewers, now that is obviously cable news, and that is heavily dominated by Fox News and is it Fox News and NBC, right? Those things, those major cable networks, right? And also younger respondents who mostly rely on social media. When we analysed the stories about mail-in voter fraud, we observed that peaks in media coverage usually consisted of large numbers of syndicated stories reported by the online sites of local papers and television stations. Now, that's the same as network propaganda in the book, where they talk about, I've talked about this before, where they launder it through low-level cable news and then sort of create that storm in a teacup, put it on mainstream Fox News, and then all of a sudden everyone's mad about M&Ms. That's a fucking known thing. So there's a lot more in the full paper, but the underlying message is that perhaps we should stop blaming social media for disinformation. That does not appear to be the root of the problem after all. Now, I think that warrants, in the context of what I'm talking about here, which is that the Digital Services Act and the political moves from people like Hillary Clinton, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News not so much. Broken clocks are right twice a day, but their interests, the way that they spin this is to avoid their own fucking culpability in spreading disinformation. Fox News are talking about censorship because they want to stop, again, AOC bought the Russian thing, all that shit, there's all that. Everything's a bit true. Everyone's got a bit of a point. Okay, so when AOC said that thing about Russiagate and Russian trolls and all that, but also that Fox News just want to spread bullshit and Republicans just want to spread their bullshit, she's not wrong. However, she's also a stooge for the other thing. It's like that. This is the thing about the American sort of there's a whole the biggest lie, the big lie is that both parties are not right wing, that both parties are not unified on most things, that both parties are, one is slightly more moderate than the other, and you might actually get through the occasional law that actually deals with the issue, where there are a few bills before Congress where they're trying to regulate tech in sort of antitrust and various other things. But, at the end of the day, they're effectively deadlocked because they're both right-wing parties. There's no pressure. There's no upward pressure from anyone. They've managed to, narrow letterbox debate to the point where it's like Democrats versus Republicans. Neither of you you're all fucking wrong. And I'm sorry, but my informed opinion is not disinformation. You are. And it's like, no, and this is where, okay, yes, you see how these things all interact in a way where this is why I fall on side with defending the right for an open internet, because the people who are, this is where you can, the letter of the law you could be in support of, but I don't support the interests that are supporting this. Okay, because they are the greatest purveyors. They get to define what disinformation is. They have a record of silencing people. The Twitter files have shown again and again and again and again. The pandemic showed again and again and again that anybody, if you fall on the wrong side of the argument from a corporation like Pfizer, whether you are gender critical feminist or whether you are, anti-war, whether you are, maybe questioning funding to Ukraine, whether you are, calling for peace, whether you are asking Pfizer to fucking open up. Imagine what are the implications for policy here, which is that this is the real threat to democracy are the people who are crying about the threat to democracy. And they're the real disinformation are the people who are crying about disinformation. And until that is fixed, then you can't support this. And the fact that they support it means I don't trust them. Does that make sense? I just instinctively do not trust the people who are pushing this legislation, even though on the surface I agree. Okay, I absolutely agree that the Digital Services Act and, this Section 230 does need some reform in terms of it. And this is, again, this is how this powerful fucking bullshit operates, which is that they're so focused on their own interests, they don't give a fuck about everyday users like you and me. So for individual everyday users like you and me, I want Section 230 reform. I want to be able to use the fact that Twitter knew about this bot problem. They know about the mass reporting. They knew about all of this wrongdoing, and they didn't act. And I then have a case. Okay. Personally, my personal interest is in supporting these mechanisms to exist. But everyone's collective interest is in not having this, because it is going to be misused and abused by the powerful. You see the difference? You see that sort of that's the conflict. And that's where I have to, and you have to as well, put yourself aside for 2 minutes for what is better for everyone. And that comes back to my thing, okay? The fact that this is a gift, the fact that it can be taken away, the fact that from all angles it is under threat. Okay, it has severe political consequences, and you need to be a bit more proactive in paying attention to this stuff, not demanding the time of people, paying for good quality content and good quality journalism, and, not people who, spread bullshit on purpose, or people who peddle easy answers in 15-second clips. I think that you should see that there is an inverse relationship between answers and length of fucking answer, okay? Because these things are extreme. There's a lot of history. I've glossed over so much, and there is so many more things that I could talk about with this, and I'm not going to, because I'm going. But, this is something that, Hillary Clinton wants to get rid of disinformation and extremism. She's the one who's doing disinformation and extremism. She's the one, no. I don't trust it. I don't trust it. Watch the interview with Hillary Clinton and Jon Stewart, sitting next to Condoleezza Rice. If that is not the fucking embodiment of evil, and it's fucking, who gives a fuck about Pizzagate shit, whatever. But that woman, I think the world dodged a bullet with her. And I think that, I was actually watching, Due Dissidents had this actually while I was in there, and they played the Trump, the footage of Trump shouting at everyone at McDonald's and in Ohio that whether it's just I missed him. It's but I also they're gonna. I don't know I don't know. What are we gonna do about this? Because the people who I don't know whether this is the media sort of fighting for their last breath, but I don't see anyone having political will to fix it. What they're doing is just doing massive overreach and calling it fighting disinformation or calling it fighting terrorism. And the Gonzalez case is extra hairy because yes, in a clear-cut case of terrorism, yes, in a clear-cut case of like a school shooting or that sort of stuff, right? There's where those things are very clear, yes. But I mean, using the word terrorism, you've got to be very careful, which is that can be misinterpreted and misappropriated, much like the Patriot Act did, okay, to justify that YouTube are allowing people to watch anything that anyone deems terrorism. Like, this is very serious. This is serious implications. So even though I could be in ultimate, like, again, I could be in support of the case and the ruling, I think that clarity is needed. But this is where the seriousness of that case, the implications are that they can effectively make YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, internet companies liable for anything they share that is arbitrarily considered terrorism. And when they're taught, when you're watching like the anti-war like protests that happened, there was an anti-protest wall. I think it was hosted by like Jimmy Dore and Max Blumenthal. That kind of like, whatever you think of them, like they're, lefty YouTubers that, are sort of less mainstream, right? And they ran this anti-war rally, and you had sort of Rachel Maddow running things. It was like a pro-Russia protest. An anti-war protest is a pro-Russia protest. This is McCarthyist. Like, this is terrifying. This is post 9/11 shit. That hysteria, that moral panic that Americans do so fucking well. And it is entertaining, and again, it would be more entertaining and it would be more fun if it was contained. But, the fact that the most evil fucking people that I can think of in support of the Digital Service Act in the EU makes me question it, okay? The fact that... it just makes, again, I'm not saying that it's going to happen. I'm saying that there needs to be guardrails around people like Hillary Clinton and bad actors, like, US political operatives that are setting up the global disinformation index and fucking calling everything they don't like disinformation, everyone they don't like terrorists, and everyone they hate fucking Russia and Nazis and TERFs and fucking all that shit. Until we have gates around that, then I'm not going to be able to support any of this. There needs to be some process. And it can't be, again, you've got this whole other thing of JK, defamation. This is where the JK Rowling case of suing people who call her these things, that has significance to it. Because if there is a ruling against that, then arbitrarily calling someone something like that has some legal weighting, and it can be protective. We're all unprotected at the moment. We're all vulnerable to this. I've been called all sorts of fucking things. I should be able to go on to a podcast and not be worried that everyone has just completely decided that I believe things that I don't believe just because it's insane. And again, that's just part of doing this kind of commentary. But at the same time, it's like, these problems are tricky. They're tricky, and anyone who's just talking about repealing an extremely important law, like Section 230, or the e-commerce directive, which was a much better law. But also, I support the Digital Services Act. I support these things. Now, again, we've got our own, but Australia don't mean fuck all. Okay, no one listens to us. We're a good model, but no one listens to us. And the tech companies mostly listen to the EU because, like I said, it's a big market. It's why China has the power it does. It's got nothing to do with political power per se. With tech companies, it's just, that's why Elon Musk is probably a better owner of Twitter at the moment, because of the geopolitical context. This is where capitalism can be good and billionaires can be good. It's complicated. The world's messy. Okay, which is that maybe a billionaire with business interests in China and business interests in America and business interests in Europe might actually be interested in keeping the peace more than someone who is only interested in one sort of, you get what I'm saying? It's not that simple. Nothing is that simple. And if I can teach you anything, if this 600 hours of me talking shit is worth anything, it is that takeaway. That is that there is nothing simple about this. These are emerging problems. They are urgent problems, and people need to start fucking Google things. Fuck, I'm busy. You don't pay me. But I'm also, just don't be, just fucking, ugh. For all the people that are like, are you awake yet, sheeple? It's like, no, just put it in. Anyway. I'm going to go. Thanks for watching. This was sort of shoehorned into my weekend because I've got so much to do, but I should be over the hump next week. Okay. I've got to get paid. I've got to pay for a surgery and all that stuff. And, it is what it is. Okay. Some people get to do it full time. Bullshit people get to do it full time. People who spread simple bullshit get to do it full time. People like me do not. And so that's fine. It's just a way to get information out. And, but I've also been writing an article that I should have sent this week that I haven't. And I'm going to work on it this afternoon, which is why the Twitter files matters. And it's for a publication here, independent media. So, but if you want me to write an op-ed, I'm more than happy to do that too. It's just that it's slow going because I'm not paid for it and it's not my full-time job. And I think you need to be, again, it's a luxury to be able to do that sort of thing and work on that stuff full time. And, unfortunately, those who are busy doing the work don't necessarily have time to produce the content that they want to produce because, people, it's a full-time effort, to do it well. So, that's just the nature of the beast. And that's why you should be supporting people who, might want to make this their full-time gig, who are committed to giving you quality information, not just people who are committed to, output and volume and entertaining you. But also, when people just pop out of nowhere and are giving like what looks like full-time effort to something, you should be suspicious and ask where that funding comes from. Just be suspicious of that. People need to pay their bills. I know what these things take, the effort required, the money required, all of those sorts of things, the resources required to produce it. And if there's no transparency around how this is produced, then be suspicious. It means that someone's selling you something. And especially on the internet, because everyone is selling you something because it's the internet, okay? It's pay to play now. So if it's getting reach, especially like I meant to do the Daily Wire thing because there is actually, I might actually do that next week, which is that the way that the whole business model and stuff, I wish that I could dedicate more time to giving you more information. I just can't. So until things change, then, I'll do it ad hoc and when I can. But I appreciate if you support me. And I'm in the process of making it so that there's a Telegram group that is the only chat channel here. It's not because I want to make it paywalled. You can join and I will invite you and it's no problem. I just want to be able to whitelist people who are turning up on my chat. It just disrupts my streams a lot when people just sort of come and, talk shit and stuff. But I'd like it to be a good, fruitful, happy, joyful place, not me having to, I just don't like it. I want to do things differently. I want to somehow try to find a way to lead by example with this stuff and show that you can create communities and that you can still create communities. And, a big part of you becoming a patron is proving that this thing is still possible because, I have always been able to make a living on the internet and I've always been able to help others make a living on the internet. And it's disappointing that my reach was taken away so arbitrarily. And, I am still considering, I'm looking at what my moves are with Twitter. I've been in contact with the head of trust and safety there. And she has assured me that they are on these things. But at the same time, they're cagey because they also know that as soon as they show that they know these things, that they make themselves liable, okay, under the law. And, but, like in Australian law, like there is the terms of service, they can't terms of service. This is another thing I can talk about. I'll do it another time, but, terms of service, they can't just, they can't replace the law with terms of service. Okay. You still have rights. So anything that's like a clause that is in conflict with your consumer rights is, null and void. Okay. So, these things are coming down the pipe. And that's why I think, getting the Juris Doctor as much as hard work as it's going to be, I'm going to need to get a scholarship for my final year because I can't afford to do the full thing, but, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. Hopefully things, settle down by then. But, I'll chip away at it. And, but these things are serious. They're emerging and they affect you. But again, I was thinking about this before, how I do sit and I wonder why, if it's worth the fight. because I'm fighting for people who don't really meet it halfway. They can't be asked. You know, I feel like people are so far down the rabbit hole, people are so far gone, that I really maybe should stop fighting people who abuse me and fighting people who can't be asked looking up a basic thing. Or, you know, it just happens to be important for everybody that these fights be fought. But it often feels like futile, definitely not appreciated, you know. But again, we'll just work through it. Thanks for watching. I've kept it under 2 hours. I'm going to go. I love you. Become a patron, please, if you can. I know everyone's fucking hurting at the moment. You know, the only people, unless you're a 1%er and happen to stumble on this stream, I don't see how anyone can afford anything at the moment. That's just, you know, the economic situation. But please stay well and just fucking commit to learning a thing that I've talked about today. Commit to reading and having a thought on it, an original thought, an original opinion, not just asking others to do the heavy lifting for you. Don't outsource your rights to your fights to other people. Fight for your own, like, you know, again, this is where I'm more about, like I said, I'm an individual. I'm an individualist. Still, you can be a socialist and an individualist. I'm an individualist in the fact that, you know, personal responsibility, take some personal responsibility for things. Obviously, you know, collectively we have responsibilities, you know, and personal responsibility only kicks in once you don't set people up to fail and make it so people can succeed and make good choices. But once those things are sorted, it's on you to, like, it's a reciprocal thing. And it's also why I don't think socialism works in any meaningful way, because there's enough socialists who don't see these things who don't see, you know, this stuff as two-way. It's like they're ultimately rent seekers. Like they're the same, they're the rent seekers of socialism, not rent seekers of capitalism. They're still the people that are just operating in self-interest, right? It's just that socialism has a better outcomes for people who, you know, are generally like relational and not transactional in the way that they approach things. But, you know, like I said, right toolkit, right problem. Okay, you don't. If you think that there's one answer for everything, then, you know, you're not thinking enough. Like I said, I can literally be in support of the DSA. I can be in support of Section 230 reform. I can agree with the legal argument here. I can also say, oppose it on this ground. I agree with it here, but I oppose it because of this reason. Those are inconsistent and incompatible with each other. But I don't think, you get what I'm saying? Like I've talked about this with Musk. Musk is the least shit option at the moment with Twitter. Okay. Better than, yeah. So get to thinking about what the least shit option is, not the only option. If you're thinking about only option, you're not thinking. But yeah, so stay well. I love you. Thank you for your precious 5 seconds. And I'll be around, I guess. We'll talk soon. Bye.